Yeah, that would be my problem. But you persisted on. More than 2 years. Huh? Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, I got it. I see you all. No, they don't. That's what I would say. Good. Yeah.
Are you still going to stop?
I'm Sam, yeah. No, I graduated in 2018. Today my brother's actually getting staggered. Believe it or not, 2 hours. Yeah. Josh is in it.
Yeah. Sometimes. Right.
Okay, man. Have a seat, Charlie.
No, I haven't. But I have told some friends where it has become rather, in fact, occurring now. So, I mean, it's pretty devastating.
Okay, we're ready to get started. If you want to find your seat, welcome. Welcome to Keys. And we are continuing our in-person as much as we can here at the church. I know there are some folks that are connecting in live streaming, and we're glad that that's available and hope that you will take advantage of that. And we're just glad to be here today. A couple of things. There are signups in the hallway for October activities. We need to get on top of those signups. We'll try to get them out on Sunday morning as well, but we need to know. And the main thing that we need to know now is the October picnic. There's the sign up out there, and we need to know that soon so that we can start planning for lunch and also plan for the shuttle from here to McNeil's Ranch if you're not planning on driving yourself. If you weren't at our lunch last week for September birthdays, we have done something new with the shuttle. We will be renting a bus type vehicle with doors that open and stairs that go up and hold on handrails, because I am done watching people potentially fall, and I don't want people to fall on my watch, and it's just becoming increasingly difficult for us to get in and out of those vans. I saw 3 near-miss tailbone fractures when we went to Shiloh's. And so we want to make sure that we're safe. I know Nancy took some pictures of the van, and we'll likely publish them somewhere so that you can see it. It was a 23-passenger, nice leather high-back seats, and even 2 tables in the front if you want to bring a snack or play cards on the way. Don't know if that'll always be in every van, but I'm taking seriously safety, and we're looking forward to, and the other plus of that is I don't have to drive it. And I've only got 3 years left to drive on the church's insurance. So be sure to sign up for the October picnic. It's noon to 3, and we do have some planning to do, but our planning committee will be meeting next Friday, and we'll get the details out to you. But we will be doing the same thing that we've done in the past with Bill Miller Barbecue. And I just need to know how many people need the shuttle, because that could make a difference on what size minibus that I rent. Because if we don't need 23 seats, if we only need 13, then we can do a 15 passenger. So make sure that you sign up for that. Next Friday, we will have Susan Pomerley. Did I say that correctly? Pomerleau. Sorry, Susan, if you're watching the live stream today. And she has been around, a longtime covenant partner of First Press. She was the sheriff for Bexar County. We have heard from her before. She has a new responsibility as U.S. Marshal, and she's going to be sharing with us what changes have taken place in her life and her responsibilities. And that sign up is out in the hallway as well. So make sure that you do sign up for that. There's a brief list of things on the table, but there's a longer list that's in the process of being published. I do have things scheduled through the end of the year, even into the first of the year. I have very good news. Just found this out on Thursday. Do you remember Miles Pike, who we live streamed from here? And Mary and I were in the audience, and many of you were on live streaming. Well, I had invited him to come in December for our Christmas party. And yesterday or Thursday, we talked, and he is coming. So we will have Miles Pike here in person live for a Christmas party on December 3rd. And we're excited about that. If he was, I know the live stream was great, but Mary and I experienced it firsthand. And so we're excited about that. So a lot of good things coming, and trying to keep up on them. And as always, if you have suggestions for speakers, I think I have two empty weeks in January that I'm looking for, and maybe the first week in February. But we're pretty much booked through the end of February. I don't think I've booked anything into March yet. So glad that you're involved, glad that you're here. We hope that we'll be increasing in our in-person, but understand that some folks just aren't ready to come out yet. And there's a lot of variables around us, and the situation is very fluid. But glad to see all of you are here in person, and hope that there are a few people that are taking advantage of the live stream, and we'll be trying to expand that, not just for folks that are COVID related, but we did send out information to all of our 55 and ups. You probably did get that yellow response card in the mail, and we hope to get more people signed up and online who have never been able to come to Keys because they don't leave their house. So we're working on that. Glad that we're here. Our speaker today is Sherman MacDaniel. I first met Sherman through a small group. I understand that small group got started back years ago when it was the 30 Days of Love, or it was intentional Bible studies, and Sandy Sturch was someone who took out books and gave them to their neighbors, and they ended up at Sherman's house for some reason. And so when I came, I was invited to join that small group. Chuck Bunn leads that. And so that's been my connection with Sherman firsthand, and have gotten to know him as a good friend. He has been involved as a caregiver for Alzheimer's. His wife, he was the caregiver for his wife who had Alzheimer's. And he is our guru for Alzheimer's. And he agreed to come and speak to us today. And we're looking forward to hearing from you, Sherman. So thank you for being here.
Let me say at the outset that I'm not a guru. I never in my wildest imagination thought I would be involved with what I've been doing for the last few years. Even though my golf game was terrible, I didn't think that I would be ever associated with a publication, and never in my wildest imagination thought that I would get a few invitations to elaborate on the publication that admittedly has my name on it, but in reality, the content was given to me, the majority of it, by the good Lord, who told me what he wanted me to say and what he wanted me not to say. So I must start by giving you a disclaimer, and that is that I am not an expert in any respect on Alzheimer's. What I can do, hopefully, is to elaborate, clarify my experience, which is in writing, and perhaps answering questions or in some way helping others. I'll give you a little background. I grew up in San Antonio, went to Alamo Heights, was a member of First Church after marrying my wife, Kendall. And 4 years after our marriage, we moved to Houston, where we were for 26 years. And then we came back to San Antonio in 1994 and have been here ever since. I had a remarkably wonderful marriage for over 50 years, a textbook marriage. And it has contributed in many respects to some of the uniqueness that is in my publication. And it has also led me to believe that those caregivers who have had a very loving, caring textbook marriage are the ones that are the most affected by spousal Alzheimer's. So my question is, how many of you are currently caring for an Alzheimer's patient? How many of you have previously cared for an Alzheimer's patient? Okay, a few hands. Well, those that did not raise a hand, you're blessed, because I found, and so many others with whom I have visited have found, the experience of caring for an Alzheimer's patient as a spouse is the most difficult, frustrating, stressful experience of our adult lives. And unfortunately, much of the medical profession, to include nurses and home care facilitators and therapists and so forth, have not made the adequate distinction between a spousal caregiver and a non-spousal caregiver. And I'm going to make an effort to expand on this with my contacts out at the medical school, because I think it needs to be integrated into the material that the healthcare professionals are providing to the public. And the explanation for that is that whether marriage is with a person of 40 years or 50 or 60, or whether it's 20 or 30, being a second marriage, for instance, harmonious marriages are created by both parties recognizing boundaries, recognizing preferences, habits, expressing appreciation, resolving issues in a very sensitive, respectful manner. And after years of harmonious, loving marriage, when a spouse is diagnosed with Alzheimer's, the world is going to change. And it changes in ways that have not been, in my opinion, as poignant as it should be. Habits change, and the whole relationship, it becomes increasingly different. That led to the good Lord's giving me the title for my guide, which is Welcome Stranger. The spouse with Alzheimer's is going to increasingly become a stranger to the caregiver. And in visiting with a lot of caregivers, it has led me to believe, fervently so, that those of us that have had a wonderful marriage are the ones that have the most difficulty taking care of that Alzheimer's patient, irrespective of whether the patients are male or female. Many times the patients become not only hostile, but dangerous. My dear friend Merton Minner Jr., who contributed immensely to my publication, our publication, was attacked 3 times by his wife with a knife. The last 2 times with a butcher knife, and he was sent to the emergency room on 2 different occasions as a result of laceration. You would not think that 2 little petite, loving, wonderful, caring couples could go through something like that. In my case, I was fortunate in that Kendall did not threaten me, nor did she wander. And those are 2 very prevalent characteristics of Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association has stated that something on the order of 60% of Alzheimer's patients have a tendency to wander. Much of that influenced by sunlight, so it becomes more prevalent for many of them to wander at night than it is during the daytime. So I have absolutely no experience with wandering. However, I have had many examples of my dear Kendall being angry at me, throwing a magazine, a book, or whatever she might have in her hand, which was fortunately nothing harmful, and slamming the door, claiming I was no help and didn't care for her, and walking out the door, and she would go out to the street, perhaps spend 2, 3, 5 minutes there, fortunately not wandering, and come back into the house. And the whole transaction, if you will, would have evaporated from her memory as to why she had gone outside. So much of the behavior is unpredictable. And what causes an explosion on one day doesn't cause an explosion the next week, which contributes immensely to the stress of the caregiver because he can't anticipate how or she, the partner, the spouse, is going to respond. So it's like walking on thin ice. You never know where the weak spot is and when you're going to have a big problem by sinking through the ice. I realized also, later than I should have, that I was a party to the very stressful experiences that I was encountering. I wish I had thought about it sooner, but I've had confirmation from almost all of the other caregivers that I visited with, both spousal as well as other members of the family. And they all acknowledged that when their caregiving began, they used whatever worked earlier in their life, be it with children or some other relationship. But those techniques with an Alzheimer's patient are not only unsuccessful, but they are a direct correlation to the explosions and whatnot. A perfect example of that. Kendall had but one pair of reading glasses at a time. She didn't ever want to have a little gold chain around her neck with glasses. Although she did teach school, she didn't want to appear to be a school mom, a teacher. But she would come into the room some 18 months, well, if you come in from the time we were married, frequently asking where her glasses are. And I would tell her, well, you probably left them in the kitchen when we were washing dishes, or did you leave them on the bed when you were taking a nap this afternoon? And halfway up the bell curve, 18 months or so after her diagnosis, my reply was the same as it had been for years and years. You probably left them in the kitchen. And if she was standing in the doorway, she would throw whatever was in her hand at me and claim, "You're no help," turn around and walk outside. It took me a long time to realize that I had to alter how I was responding to that. Multitasking obviously didn't work. I couldn't remain in my chair reading whatever I was reading and respond to her in a way that was helpful. So late in my journey with her, I realized I had to get up out of my chair, go over to the doorway, give her a little peck, and suggest that I'd help her find them. But when I said, "You probably left them in the kitchen," was accusatory. I was not sensitive to that at the time. And the one thing you cannot do with an Alzheimer's patient is to argue or have any meaningful dialogue over an issue of some sort. So by altering my communication with her, I realized subsequently that I was experiencing fewer explosions. And the fewer explosions were very helpful to me because my stress went down. I can't tell you how many times in the 4.5 years after being diagnosed, I can't tell you how many times I asked myself, why am I having to incur all of this stress? What have I done to deserve this? And it was a recurring question. And I have subsequently concluded that the good Lord arranged this in a manner. I had no children nearby to help. I was a 24/7 caregiver. Kendall absolutely refused to go to a daycare facility, which have been closed because of the pandemic, but were quite active here in San Antonio and all over the country. And it resulted in my realizing that I was really a contributor to the very thing that was making life so stressful. Looking back on it, it was a blessing, because had the good Lord made my journey somewhat easier, either by having one of our children in town or letting me get outside help to come in and give me a break. I would not have most likely ever participated in writing anything relative to Alzheimer's caregivers. But the good Lord has been a very major part in my life for ever since before getting married, really. And I can only say thank you to him for all of the wonderful things that he has done for me that clearly, in retrospect, were the result of his care, support, and love. And the only thing that I can think of that is a benefit of getting old, and I can attest to being old, is it gives us an opportunity to look back in our life and see the multiple occasions that the good Lord intervened. And in some cases, and in my life as well, doors were closed on occasion and not opened. And those doors that didn't get opened, that were closed, where I had some element to believe they would remain open, turned out to be a blessing. So I can only say that I have been one of the richest people on earth by what I've experienced. There's a big difference between rich and wealth. Wealth is only measured in dollars and assets, but rich includes all that in addition to wealth, friendship, experiences, occupation, so on and so forth. But for those that are involved with an Alzheimer's patient, whether it's spousal or some other relationship, it is a very trying and frustrating experience. And those of us that have had decades of wonderful existence, respect, love, affection, consideration, find that turned upside down on that journey with an Alzheimer's patient. The Alzheimer's Association is very adept at raising money, increasing the awareness of the disease, and needless to say, the incidence of the disease is increasing yearly. It is estimated that 11.3% of all Americans 65 years of age and older have Alzheimer's. And as the age increases, the incidence increases accordingly. And those Hispanics in this country have 150% higher incidence of Alzheimer's than do Anglos. and African Americans right at 2 times the incidence of Alzheimer's. They're searching for explanations. They think that lifestyle has something to do with it, perhaps genetics, but they certainly haven't been able to carry the investigation and research to any conclusion that would have meaningful solutions, such as drugs, lifestyle changes, food, behavioral changes, what be it. And there are about over 60%, almost 2/3 of the Alzheimer's patients in this country are female. And paradoxically, the majority of the Alzheimer's caregivers in this country are also women. So women have a much greater burden of Alzheimer's care than do males. There's an awful lot of research going on with Alzheimer's. It's the largest single area of research going on according to the FDA. Progress is very slow in coming, and Biogen's drug that was just approved earlier this year was suspect in terms of its efficacy and was accompanied with a high price, $56,000 a year. So it has been a very controversial and certainly to Biogen a disappointing occurrence. But there's hope that there will be some breakthroughs, and many of the scientists believe that it's very likely we'll have combinations of various drugs in order to really have a widespread, effective efficacy that would translate through not only the male and female sexes, but also other races. I'd be very pleased to answer any questions that you might have or answer any thoughts that you might have.
Is the life expectancy, is there a difference in life expectancy?
Is there a difference
In life expectancy
of whom?
somebody with Alzheimer's?
I can only say yes, it will shorten lives if that's what you're driving at. I can't recall a specific figure in response to your question, but it does shorten life, and it is certainly in the top 3, depending on whose survey you're reading. It's in the top 3 causes of death in this country: cardiac cancer and Alzheimer's. And it's anticipated that Alzheimer's will be increasing as the efficacy of cancer drugs become more pronounced, and the improvements have been much more noticeable in cancer and cardiovascular health than in Alzheimer's, where there's continued deterioration of numbers and the others are showing improvement.
What was the progression of, in your experience, or maybe others, of knowing that someone was forgetful and then getting to the point of diagnosed Alzheimer's? You know, I usually park in a general same place when I go to the grocery store, if I go to the same grocery store, where I always park next to one of those cart keepers so I can remember where I parked when I come out of the store.
I do the same.
You know, so I,
Experience has some answer to that, I think.
but at what point are you diagnosed with Alzheimer's and not just having bad memory issues?
That is a very good question, and one that I can only respond to by saying that the medical profession has been working and continues to work on a standard regimen in the determination of the of mental acuity. Alzheimer's is by far the largest of the various dementia issues. There are a number of other much smaller causes of dementia than Alzheimer's. That Alzheimer's is hands down 80%, I think, of the case level of dementia. Yes, sir.
There seem to be a lot of big issues, at least from what you're presenting, on how to really take care of Alzheimer's patients. I mean, once it's determined that that's what that person has, but we don't seem to have, maybe, from what you said, as much insight into how are we going to care for that patient. You mentioned several things about how you treated or how you dealt with your wife in these situations. And I think those are the very important things that we really need to know going forward with this particular condition.
Well, care includes the whole pie, if you will.
It does, I'm sure.
And I'm not the one to give much help in terms of responding to that question because of my experience with only one patient and stories about many others. But I think you could say that every patient is different. And I don't think you would get much controversy or criticism by making that statement. There are a plethora of sources relative to caring for a patient in terms of hygiene, exercise, those that have a problem with day and night, responding to that, so on and so forth. The 36-hour day does a pretty good job of touching on issues such as that. But it doesn't, the 36-hour day doesn't, to my experience, offer an iota of help to the caregiver. And that may be partially in response to the fact that every patient's different in
Keeping the money
a number of respects.
keeping keeping the mind active in reading and playing cards or bridge or debating or.
There's more and more evidence of that being a contributor to good mental acuity and helping postpone, if nothing else, or minimize the effect of dementia.
Nothing curable now. As far as,
Yeah. We do have a wonderful effort going on at the University of Texas Medical School, San Antonio, where the Biggs family have an institute with a world-renowned leader there who's just written up in the Express News Sunday a week ago, Dr. Sahadria. And I'm told that she has received more NIH grants than anyone in American history. Yes, sir.
Your wife didn't want to go to a daycare center. What's the proportion of people that are treated by their spouse as opposed to?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You said your wife did not even want to go to a daycare
Yes.
facility. Is there statistics on how many people are institutionalized as opposed to being taken care of at home? With Alzheimer's.
I can't answer that in a way that would satisfy you, I don't think. I've not seen any figures on that. The Meals on Wheels had 3 such facilities, which unfortunately they had to close down during the pandemic. And I supplied 100 copies to them just before the pandemic. And I've not had any requests for any additional copies because I don't think they have reopened again. Yes.
Now, in your own experience, to sort of protect yourself and have some semblance of self-love, did you find it easier at times to treat your wife as a stranger and not presume that anything of her past was going to show again? That she was going to be a stranger that you treated kindly, but did not expect any of those previous relationships? Is it easier for you to do that?
I would have to say in response to your question that I became increasingly less familiar to her. And I'm told by most all of the friends with whom I've spoken that have a spouse in a facility that there becomes a point where the Alzheimer's patient cannot acknowledge the relationship with the person that's standing in front of them, a husband, or vice versa. If the male is the patient, he can't tell you that the woman standing in front of him is his wife. That doesn't come initially with the diagnosis. That comes after months and months of the effect of the disease. And then beyond that point, they lose a great deal, if not almost all, of their physical ability. They're bedridden, and they will smile at a familiar face, perhaps, and if so, that could be considered constructive.
My question, though, was not, I think from what we have read, we realize that losing that awareness of who other important people are, that the one who has Alzheimer's is a part of the disease. They just stop recognizing children, they stop recognizing the spouse. But the spouse who still tries to care for them or visit with them, is it helpful for that healthy spouse to begin to see that individual more as a stranger, so they don't make presumptions that any of the past will be there, that it's a day-to-day confrontation and a helpful relationship with someone that is a stranger to you as a healthy, they're no longer the person they used to be.
I think I can best answer that question. Thank you. I think I can best answer that question by a little clarification. My dear wife, Kendall, was an only child. And after we moved to Houston, her father had previously died a few months before we departed San Antonio. She recognized that her mother was having a problem of memory. And soon after we were in Houston, moved her mother to the equivalent of the Forum here in San Antonio, the best of the care facilities, where she was provided with assisted living and then, if necessary, into more critical care. And she made every effort to isolate me from the problems that she had with her mother. As soon as mother arrived in Houston, Kendall thought it would be a wonderful thing and felt a responsibility. So she would periodically go pick her mother up while the kids were in school, bring mother to lunch, and then sometimes Louise, Kendall's mother, would want to take a nap after lunch, and she would take a nap. But the point came that day when she had to be returned. And from the moment, if not before, getting into the car, Louise would tell Kendall, I don't want to go home to the facility. I want to live here with you. Why are you taking me home? Why can't I stay with you? And it was that diatribe the entire distance back to the facility. There were days when I left the office in the afternoon, and before arriving at home, I could get a vibe, believe it or not, on those days when Kendall had her mother home. And I would go in the house and say, did you have Louise here today? And she would sometimes break into tears and say yes. And she said, it's just so stressful. I can't tell you how bad it is. And I feel so depriving, not being able to respond to her better than I am doing, and so forth. After a few months of that, somehow when Kendall took her mother back into the facility, one of the attendants, her favorite attendant there, said, Miss Kendall, we would sure appreciate it if you didn't take your mother home. I can't tell you how difficult it is after you leave, bringing her home. Every time she sees one of us, she says, I want to get out of here. I want to go live with my daughter. Why am I here? And so, with great reluctance, Kendall stopped bringing her to the house. And in lieu of that, drove to the facility to visit her mother. And that turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to her in her adult life, was realizing that what she thought was a helpful gesture was just 100% the opposite. So her mother was much more docile, much more tranquil by remaining in her home, if you will, at the care facility than bringing her back and forth to the house. So that may be a slight clarification of your question. Beyond that, I really am not capable of adding anything that I would feel would be constructive. Yes, sir.
My experience was different from yours. My wife had Alzheimer's. A good friend of mine, he had Alzheimer's. The guy I worked with for 40 years, he had Alzheimer's. And each and every one of them was different. A judge in the district court of Midland had Alzheimer's. I went to visit him just at a facility, and he asked me, said, you work for Southwestern? I said, no, I work for Southwestern Bell. He said, well, my son worked for Southwestern Airlines, and I want you to get his job back because they've changed it. Well, there's nothing you can do. And I guarantee you, if you don't think a cardboard box of Kleenex will hurt, just let a strong man beat you in the head with it where you can't get away.
Yeah.
My wife never forgot where her glasses was, where anything else was. Her problem is we moved from one location to another in 2000, my 50th wedding anniversary, and moved next door to some pretty nice people. But my son is self-employed, been most of the thing. His wife well-employed. Charlie knows my daughter-in-law. But my son would come over every morning, and Dad, I come over to see Mom. I said, well, she's in here, and we'd go in the bedroom, and I said, Norma, Randy's here to visit you. Oh, come have a seat, Randy. And he would sit and talk to his mother for an hour, telling her what he was doing and wasn't doing. And he said, well, I got some paperwork I got to do. I'm going in the kitchen and get it on my computer and walk in the other room. The bedroom was here, the kitchen was here. And when he stepped over that threshold, you know the next name she shouted? It wasn't Donna, it wasn't Janet. Those were my other two kids. It was Newell. And I mean, it was like, you come immediately right now, not after a while. And I stepped in there and she said, who is that man? I said, it's just me.
Yeah.
Did that for months. She didn't wander. She didn't get out of bed. When we got married, she drank coffee. She would drink about this much, about 2 sips out of every cup. And I don't care who was in Dallas, Texas, or Little Rock, Arkansas for breakfast. That's all she wanted. So I'm not a good cook, but I did learn how to bake bacon and eggs. And she liked her eggs sunny side up, which I figured out how she did it. And I give it to her, and she ate the bacon, she ate the toast, she ate the eggs. And then one morning, she drank coffee. And one morning she said, I don't want that. You're trying to pause me, take those eggs away. She ate the bacon, she ate the toast. She drank 2 sips of coffee. And 2 or 3 days later,
No.
bring me that toast. You're trying to poison me. I don't know where she gets those in.
That sounds very typical.
And she went through that, and then when she got down to it, she wasn't doing anything. She told me one morning, she says, can I have another cup of coffee? I've been married to her for a dozen years, and she never asked me for more coffee ever. And I said, sure. I gave her a cup of coffee, and she drank that, and she said, can I have another cup? I said, as long as that machine will turn out that coffee, you can have as many as you want. Now, I would go to her and tell her, I have to go to HEB, which is 10 blocks away. And she'd say, okay, you gonna be okay? Yeah, I'll be okay. I go, and come in the door, she, excuse the expression, she said, where the hell have you been? You've been gone all day long.
No.
No. You can't argue with her, you just have to say, yeah, all right, I'm
You
sorry.
cannot argue, and you cannot engage in any kind of a constructive dialogue involving facts and circumstances, dates, whatever it might be. It's just beyond them.
But you just have to take whatever she gives you or doesn't give you and go with it.
That's true.
Uh,
And what happens today is different than what happens tomorrow or what happened the day before.
My wife's always been a private person. I had hospice come in, and they sent a nice Hispanic lady that was a grandma to 10 kids, and she had the personality of this lady. She came in and she told, I'm going to take care of you. She said, what do you mean? Well, I'm going to bathe you, I'm going to fix your hair. And my wife had never had anybody in 40 years fix her hair. And that lady says, yeah. She ended up just by being nice and kind and telling her, I'm going to do this, and you're going to like it. And that lady, when she come on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, when the doorbell rang and she heard her name, she was tickled to death.
Yeah.
Now, nobody else she liked. Now, her daughter, she never forgot. Her sister, she never forgot. But I guarantee you, her son, after an hour of talking, she forgot who he was.
That sounds typical.
And he looks just like him.
Let's
Exactly.
move back up here.
I'm sorry, I ran along, but I just had to get.
No, that's fine. That's fine. And you can continue those conversations around the table. Thank you, Sherman. Do you know that? Is it hereditary? Alzheimer's, is it hereditary?
There's some thought that there is a contributor of genetics, but
We don't know that for sure.
is certainly
Hmm?
undecided
Mhm.
as to details, extent of that involving age and, there's so many variables.
So that hasn't been determined and would be very difficult to figure out. we all know that whether you have experienced someone with Alzheimer's in your family or have had friends, it is very difficult. It's very difficult to watch that person, the changes that take place in that person's life, the changes that take place in your own life. And I think what Nancy was getting at, how do you cope with that? Is it easier to say, this is a stranger to me now, or is that a coping mechanism? I think that's where you were going. And it is difficult to watch somebody that you knew and know and love be not that person. And I think the caregiver needs caregivers around them. So, did I put words in your mouth that you didn't say?
I have not had the experience with someone I was related to, but I know in various aspects of being a vegan active, I was a caregiver sort of a person for about a year and a half. And it was so much easier to make her happy the times that I was with her, to kind of go with whatever the myth was of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever story she wanted to tell, or something she wanted to do. Because in the moment, she was happy.
Mm-hmm.
An hour later, she would not remember any of that. But that, to me, that was not important.
Mm-hmm.
The hour or so that I was with her, or 4 hours that I was with her on occasion, she was happy during that time.
Mm.
And I think that with someone that you love, that you're personally attached to, self-preservation would probably mean you're going to have to say, this person is a growing stranger.
Mm-hmm.
But to make this person happy and safe, this is what I need to do.
And that's the growing piece on the part of the caregiver or the one who is coming along beside them.
Joe, I got one more question too, if you can take it. Does Alzheimer's affect more of the long-term or the short-term memory?
Long-term or short-term, do you know?
That has been recognized, yes, that many of the Alzheimer's patients reach a point where their long-term memory is noticeably better than the short-term. And then that long-term memory will begin to disappear.
So the short-term then is a good indication that you should go and have to check
Initially
that.
short-term in most cases.
Thank you.
They can't remember who the president is, what day of the week it is, what month.
And those are all the questions that the doctor asked in that visit that you hate to go to, that they're going to ask me that, and then they're going to tell me some numbers at the beginning and ask me to remember them at the end. We all hate that visit, and that's they're testing for that. Well, Sherman, thank you so much. We certainly haven't covered the whole scope, but my hope and prayer is that when, and it probably is more likely to say when than if you are that becomes a challenge in your life with a friend or with a spouse or with someone. We hope that even this would inspire you to take a look into some things that you might be helpful to you if that happens for you. And so it's on the part of the caregiver, I think, to a lot of acceptance of the position of the person that they're caring for. And it's disappointing to not have that person in front of you, seemingly. And I think that's the hard piece. So Sherman did bring copies of his booklet with him. They'll be available at the door as you leave. We didn't put them on the tables because we didn't want you reading them during the time that he was speaking to us. And we have a gift for you, Sherman. I was investigating as I asked you if you ever received this book, because you have been at First Press for a long time, but that is just a token of our appreciation for you being with us today. And that's a history before our 175th. I think that history was, what year was that? That was 1995. So thank you for being here, and we appreciate your time. Let me pray, and we'll have lunch. Sam, could you zoom in on the lunch so people online can see how beautiful it is? What you're missing by not being here? No, I don't mean to whet your appetites that way. We are working at trying to figure out how we can live stream the lunch so that you can join with us, but we haven't figured that one out yet. But let's pray together. Father, thank you for time together face to face. Thank you for fellowship around these tables. Thank you for the friendships that we share and that we celebrate. And as we move forward into more in-person meetings, pray that you would help us to be smart, help us to be safe. And thank you for the technology that we have for live streaming. But we pray that today, as we fellowship around these tables, that you would bless the food that we share together, bless our conversations, and thank you for those that have prepared it for us. Go before us, help us to know and do what you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.